All right, Rob Browne here at Paul Schaefer in the late night man there. That's pretty impressive. We got awesome show today. It's the night before official begin of March Madness. Ronnie Sanders, AU Undercover, Kevin Scarbinsky, Scarbo Knows, has added a great new show right here on this channel. And not going to waste any time, man. Subscribe to this channel because we're the home of free speech and great content. And Ronnie, Kevin, 'twas the night before it all begins. Auburn's expectations all season long have been to win the whole thing, and they're up in Lexington practicing right now as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, it should be a fun weekend for sure. I know that the players are ready to get going. I'm sure they're tired of talking and ready to get going.
Yeah.
Kevin, the best moment that I saw on video today of their workout in Rupp Arena was Tahad Pettiford went in and dunked one, and Chad Baker-Mazara walked in from the corner and said, "Game shots, guys, game shots." In other words, no goofing around, no dunk contest. Let's take the shots we're going to be taking tomorrow and beyond. And it was just a moment, but it was a flash of maturity from CBM that Auburn needs and will continue to need to make a deep run in this tournament.
Yeah. I mean, I think the team, and they left Auburn yesterday, Chad Baker-Mazara, he's the subject of a lot of people's, comments about Auburn. But if he's keeping himself, he's got to be a passionate player. But he's 25. He's the oldest guy on the team. If he decides to play within himself, I mean, Auburn can beat everybody they play, Doug.
Good evening, good afternoon. I'm all disoriented with March Madness. Good afternoon. Hey, rumor has it, Scarbo, the great Scarbo, that you did what I did on my second. I limit myself to 2 brackets. I'm not going to go 10 and then claim the best one was the only bracket I submitted. But that you had the unthinkable in the state of Alabama, an Auburn and Alabama championship game.
Yeah,
I did. I'm calling for Armageddon.
Woo, God!
I'm calling for Armageddon.
Well,
I said, and I'm glad you said that, Doug, because I am not a fan of multiple brackets. I've typically only done one, and not done well in that one, but at least I try to keep it to one.
There's honor among thieves.
I am riding this ride to the very end. So I'm either going to be Nostradamus or Nostradamus. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, I had, this thing. First of all, that if there has never in history been a perfect bracket legitimately submitted. I think I'm right about that, guys. Fact check me.
Warren Buffett would know.
And the iteration, it numbs the mind, even if you're an MIT grad in high level quant. It numbs the mind, the impossibility of getting it right. And because there's so many different iterations that would be required, even if you did do 12 or more brackets. But what the reason I'm with you, Kevin, I am riding or dying with the Auburn Tigers because this is not a month to be objective unless you're a serious ESPN or other journalist. Which Kevin is, and I know you aren't at the Post-Herald. The Birmingham News anymore, but you're still a credible.
Let's get that newspaper right there, Doug.
The Daily Fabarian.
That was the bald guy that used to write for the Post-Herald.
I understand, and I do apologize. I'll make it up to you, Kevin. But I think if not this Auburn team, then which one? For God's sake, they've got metrics, plenty, and late season slump. But, when you play 1 seeds and 3 seeds, and then you go on the road after you're just won this locked up the regular season SEC, and you go to College Station, in a way that's forgivable. I think it is a buzz has always been a little bit of a matchup problem for Bruce. But my share of pundits that I've read are by no means down on this Auburn team just because they had some struggles late in the season. But I don't blame any of them for being high on the Florida Gators. Just watch these cats play. They look like a load. On the other hand, in that region, is it West? They have got a tough path. They could get Danny Hurley in UConn. They could get Maryland, not to be overlooked. And they're almost certainly going to get St. John's if they win a couple of games.
Rob, this is where you jump in and say, don't forget about Memphis.
Well,
Dane Danger.
Sorry about that.
I'm telling you, when those dudes want to play, they got dudes.
They're good.
AJ had 42 in the semi of the AAC tournament. Danger is dangerous down low.
Yeah.
They can scare some people.
Well, they've got to go to Seattle, and they're a 5 seed. Most people thought they'd be a 7, maybe an 8. They won 29 games. I mean, they're not playing the competition that Auburn does, but the city of Memphis really goes crazy over 3 things: the mention of Elvis, the smell of barbecue, and when the Memphis Tigers are doing well. It absolutely captivates the attention. Just like this basketball with Auburn. I mean, guys, Ronnie, look at the page views. Look at the number of people that are coming to Auburn AU Undercover. You can throw those numbers out because would-be sponsors and stuff, if you're watching, there's no better place to reach than right here. But I think Auburn basketball people now are at a point where they get just as angry losing in basketball as they do football. Doug talked about get away from the hut mentality about a loss. You got a week between football games, a month on bowl games or whatever. But now I can't think of a more meaningless game, and I hate losing. But that game was put on the schedule almost knowing that Auburn would have clinched the SEC. And Buzz Williams, he's a nightmare for Bruce Williams. But, yeah, I think the Auburn fan base is as dialed in as I've ever seen them in ever.
Hey, isn't that Yale A&M game is kind of compelling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Certainly is.
It is. How about the NCAA selection committee like throwing up ghosts at Auburn, Yale, Texas A&M?
Or how about pretending that Louisville is an 8 seed so they get a virtual home game in Rupp? I don't want to whine. I'm Auburn. Any Auburn fan that whines about where we are is. Yeah. But Bruce earned that, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge.
Go ahead.
For Auburn people, right?
Yeah.
Rupp Arena seats 24,000. Auburn should put more people in there than Louisville. If Louisville gets by Creighton in the first round, which I'm not sure they will. In fact, I would lean to Creighton, and I'm still filling out my bracket, but I'm going back. I'm going from back to front. I started with Auburn as a national champion, worked back from there. So I really think Creighton's going to win that game.
I think Creighton is a tougher matchup. They've got some bigs, a 7'1" guy, and some bigs inside. But I think Louisville brings enough of a crowd that could make it interesting. Although Auburn has thrived on the road this year, and I agree with you, Kevin. I'm making up a number, but wouldn't be surprised if Auburn didn't have, 6,000 or 8,000 Auburn fans. Is that high, do you think? Who knows?
I don't. I mean, Ronnie, what are your message boards, your forums on AU Undercover? Are there a lot? There's so many Auburn people in Nashville and Memphis that, they're not all in Lee County.
No, I mean, look, Auburn travels well. Historically, it's traveled well, and I don't think that's going to change. I think that Auburn fans will show up in force, and Bruce said that earlier this week. Somebody asked him about playing in Lexington and potentially playing against Louisville, and he says, "Hey, look, our people travel; they'll be here." So I expect that they'll show up.
Guys, it seems like the perfect moment. I don't know about y'all, but there is the eve of when these games kick off, especially for the teams that aren't just glad they made it, but don't have any optimism that they're going to make it very far. You always hope to be surprised, but there's just a mild touch of anxiety that those of us that played sports, you feel it the morning of a game that's going to be a big Friday night football game. I'm feeling a little of that, and it's because the real story with Auburn, since this is an Auburn audience largely, is can they start this tournament back at midseason form, the way they were playing, just mowing people down for the most part. Florida came to Neville Arena and exposed some things, and Florida's going to do that with a lot of people. But or will they drop off in Chaney Johnson's play, especially in the last game in Todd Pettiford's play? What was he, 0 of 8?
Yeah.
You just can't imagine that that's going to last. But I dredged up a backstory from the great film Hoosiers. Perfect movie to be watching if you have time to kill tonight. And may the great Gene Hackman rest in peace. What a loss. I know he was up in his 90s, but what a career he had. But in the filming of Hoosiers, that scene where they had to film Jimmy Chitwood's jump shot at the end, and of course you remember he calls Chitwood, Jimmy, you're gonna be a decoy, and they all looked at him like, you're correct. No, I'm not gonna be a decoy. I'll make it, coach. Well, in the filming of it, in the warm-ups, the actor is played by actor Maris Valanis, if I'm pronouncing that right. He was having a lot of shooting troubles, like Tahad Pettiford in the last game, like Chaney Johnson. And all of a sudden, when it was lights, camera, action, they said the actors and producers later talked about it was just organic. The most magical thing happened. Chitwood took the ball, dribbled it, and the first time he let it fly, nothing but net. And all the extras and everybody stormed the court. So they just talked about he couldn't. In fact, Hackman had said in warm-ups to the producer, listen, you got to bring him in closer or we'll be in here all night. I'd give him a closer shot. No, it had to be out that far. He was missing everything. So when they had kind of a reunion with the actors later, Pizzo, who produced the film, asked the actual Plump, the guy who made the shot, hey, did we get the last 18 seconds right? And Plump said, perfect. So the point is, sometimes, it's great for Florida. Auburn can relate from a year ago. Auburn looked like they were invincible coming out of Nashville and mowing down everybody in that. Good job, producer.
There you go. Graphics.
Mowing down everybody. Best damn producer that no one's ever heard of, Rob. And so, man, it matters when you get hot, and there's no predictive value necessarily in how you did either all season long in the case of Auburn or in the SEC tournament in the case of Florida, because all these teams, they haven't seen them all. They're going to present new challenges. And like one of your guests the other day, Rob, said that some of these coaches like Hurley, and there's several others, are just pure game coaches. And you don't run, I think the SEC is more pure athleticism. We've got great coaches, but for the most part, they just turn their guys loose to be more athletic.
Yeah. Well, I'll throw this out at all of y'all. Great video there on the Chiron from Brendan. But in the SEC in the past, I've thought this league had a lot of great athletes and some exceptional basketball players versus maybe the ACC had more great basketball players versus being great athletes. Now, I think the conference is at a point where the two have become one. You have great athletes that are great basketball players with high basketball IQs. So, that's what I'm seeing, guys. That's what they told me in Fort Payne.
You don't have to look any farther than Janai Broome.
Yeah.
To see an example of that. Even Bruce Pearl said in the last
week,
he can't really jump. He can't really jump. He's not bouncing out. He's not Chris Porter bouncing out of the gym, throwing back, put back dunks on LSU. And if you haven't seen that, YouTube that. That's one of the all-time great dunks in Auburn history and SEC history. Chris was he was a highlight reel every night. But Janai Broome is
calling that. Oh, get ready, ESPN.
He is a intelligent basketball player, an old school basketball player. His footwork is superb. He has great hands. He has terrific vision. We've seen it with his passing. Timing. I mean, he's in the top 5 in the SEC in assist to turnover ratio as a back to the basket big man. He's an extraordinary old school basketball player, and he is much better. But who he reminds me of, and this is really going back right to the beginning of my career covering Auburn basketball, is Jeff Moore.
Yep.
Now, Jeff was a little wider. He was a wide body out of midfield here in Birmingham. Yeah. But Jeff was money on that 15-foot jump shot. And Sonny Smith's offenses were designed, he ran plays, and they would be, they'd be rusty here during the season. But when you got to the postseason, they were on it. They were sharp. They had those plays down. And then when they started playing teams that hadn't seen those plays, like when they went to the Sweet 16 in 85, the Elite Eight, the very next year in 86, it was in large part because that really crisp offense they ran. And Jeff Moore was a big part of that. And rest in peace. He passed away some years ago, but always have fond memories of Jeff. He was a great guy to be around, to cover, kept in touch with him through the years.
Hey, did you guys see, it's kind of hard to miss, you talk about motives that the selection committee has, subplots they can create. I'm probably overthinking it. They're probably just trying to sell tickets. That's why Louisville's set up to go to Rupp Arena and pack that out. And so be it. If Auburn's not good enough to beat this Louisville team, we probably weren't making the Final Four anyway. Yeah. I just like them to stick to their methodology. But if you look at what they've done down there with in Florida's bracket, you've got in the bottom left, you've got three iconic coaches. You know where I'm going. Pitino, Bill Self, for God's sake, who has had the career he's had, and Coach Cal, and only one of those three guys can make it to the Sweet 16, because Arkansas and Arkansas plays Kansas. And that's going to be a game I'm not going to miss. That ought to be fun. This Arkansas team's coming on, and then Pitino. Everybody's hot on St. John's with good reason, but it's just weird that it sets up that two of those legendary coaches don't even have a chance to go much farther.
Well, Franz Beard pointed out on this morning's show a little bit of trivia here. 1988. Remember Danny Manning and the Amazings, Kansas, Oklahoma. Billy Tubbs, one of the great comb-overs of all time. God, he's just such a great coach, though. Oklahoma, Kansas, that Monday night game, Kansas wins. Larry Browne had two assistants on his staff, John Calipari and Bill Self. That's pretty cool. Talk about longevity. And I think, and Lauren Meadows this morning pointed out, Larry Browne won his NBA title with the Detroit Pistons, and then he won a college title with Kansas. He's the only coach to ever do that. And Penny, a couple of years ago, remember he was an advisor at Memphis? You should have listened to that guy. The man has forgotten more in his dreams than we all know about basketball.
Yeah, that 88 Oklahoma team, they beat Auburn in the second round.
That's right.
It was a real shootout. They would hang 100 on teams in a heartbeat, that Oklahoma team. They came through Birmingham in the regional. And I did a big feature on Billy Tubbs, the coach, and he was a nut. Yes. He was an absolute nut.
He was
in
crazy.
fact, he'd been in a car accident in the previous year, and one of the other coaches in the conference said, maybe if we run over Billy again, he'll be okay.
Oh, God. Was Wayman Tisdale on that team?
Oh, gosh, he might have been. He was around that time. He might have been a couple of years later. I know Ricky Grace. They had Mookie Blaylock in the backcourt on that team. Stacey King was their low post scorer. I was shot that championship game. It was in Kansas City. Talk about home crowd advantage. It was Kansas playing in Kansas City against Oklahoma, and it was tied at 50-50 at the half. Everybody in the gym was exhausted. And then Danny Manning took over in the second half, and Kansas won that national title with Larry Browne.
You know what else is just delicious about March Madness? And for me, honestly, I probably enjoy the first weekend, that Thursday through Sunday, more than everything that follows. And some years I have to retract that because there's such compelling games, and like North Carolina State making the run when they're about to fire their coach. Probably had fired their coach, and then you can't fire him. But if you park in front of multiple TVs and watch these games, there'll be a handful of them where the prohibitive underdog adopts the Donald Trump "what the hell do you have to lose" doctrine, and they'll do something radical like shoot 50 threes. Increase if you're averaging 38% from the 3-point line. Then increase the number of attempts from there, and what do you have to lose? And it usually doesn't hit. And then another team will try to that already likes to play it slow. They'll milk the play clock down to 5 almost every possession, and somebody's got to win the game 45-40. It's just, you see so much. It's like going through a smorgasbord, an all-you-can-eat buffet, and getting to watch so many different strategic approaches to these games. And then you see the teams that are clearly favored. Sometimes the anxiety gets to them. I think that happened with Auburn against Yale last year. All of a sudden, you're in a dogfight and something surreal happens, like CBM getting booted at the 5-minute mark. So you don't know what to expect in these games. And there'll be some blowouts this weekend. But as sure as I'm sitting here, there will be High Point that nobody's ever heard of, High Point, North Carolina. It averages 82 points a game. Coach Allen Huss, that's 18th in the nation in scoring. So, can they win a big one early? A lot of people are hot on Drake, which probably means Drake is going to get waxed in the first game. But it's just so doggone compelling, isn't it?
It is.
Well, it is, and I'll tell you the St. John's team really is intriguing to me. I mean, Rick Pitino can still coach after all these years, and
he looks like a cadaver. But man, just put some makeup on him, dye his hair a little more, and you're right. And he has mentally coached this team. He's excoriated them. I'm sure y'all have seen that video. Mm-hmm. Who hasn't? And I'd be nervous having to go up against them, but I've got Auburn having to play St. John's in the Final Four.
Wow. Well, he's not a cadaver, Doug. He's a vampire. He's 438 years old, actually. Yeah. And he's never going to die. He's going to be coaching long after all of us are gone and taking his 12th and 13th teams to the NCAA tournament.
I think he's been married about 60 years, hasn't he?
I don't think we want to talk about his personal relationship.
I know.
Let's stick to coaching.
The wrong
considering what happened considering what happened at Louisville.
Yeah, not his shining moment.
Maybe we could maybe we could use that table there.
Yikes.
Let's see. Oh, and also on High Point, keep an eye on their guy that
there's his book.
Benham. Remember Benham, he does this called mean mugging, and he'll come down court looking like this. High Points player Benham. It's just going to be electric to watch. And if anybody calls my significant other and says, "Yeah, hey, can y'all come over for this party, this dinner party this weekend?" I'm gonna say I'm feeling sick. All of a sudden, I'm gonna have to stay home.
You've got the plague. Yeah. Look, there are going to be a lot of basketball widows through the late night April 7th. And how convenient that Mallory wants us to come for spring break next week to Atlanta. I am so excited. I've never been more excited to go see the granddaughter and Mallory and Tyler because Auburn will be in Atlanta.
Are you kidding me? That's going to Auburn's got to get to Atlanta. That would be such a missed opportunity because there's going to be some burnt orange and navy blue packing that State Farm Arena, I would suspect.
Here's a question about Louisville. They've won 21 of their last 23 games. They're ranked 10th. I think there's only been 2 matchups with top 10 in that first weekend. And I would be embracing the hell out of that if I'm Bruce Pearl. First off, take care of Alabama State. Don't get stung by the Hornets. That was an attempt at a joke. No humor here.
I'm going to come back to that in a second, Rob.
Yeah, but then Louisville, I'm telling you, growing up in Memphis, Memphis, they would bring at least 12, 15 chartered buses of fans to the Mid-South Coliseum or the FedEx Forum. Good God, those people up there are basketball savvy. But you know what? Auburn's battle tested. I got, and Doug, guys, Louisville, they hadn't been to the tournament. It's been a rough patch though. But remember, Pitino was there 17 years. It didn't end well, but he's taken 6 teams now to the tournament. If he can get St. John's in the Final Four, that'd be 4. The last time St. John's went to the Final Four was 1985. Remember the next year on Sunday, Auburn played. They had got him Walter Berry, and Auburn laid it to him in that 86 season. God, there's so much history. Auburn's been there before.
That was round 2 in '86. Yeah. Walter Berry was the National Player of the Year for St. John's.
Yep.
And Chuck Person dusted him.
Yes.
Chuck was one of the best players in the entire country that year, the entire year. And that was, remember, the year before they put in the three-point shot. There's no telling how many points he would have scored had there been an arc on the court when he was playing at Auburn. But he dominated that game. He dominated UNLV in the Sweet 16. And then they ran into Louisville in an Elite 8 game. But coaching matters, guys. And here's an interesting fun fact. Did you guys realize that Bruce Pearl will set a record tomorrow? He will become the Auburn coach who has made the most appearances in the NCAA tournament, one more than Sonny Smith. This will be his 6th. And if they win, he will break a tie with Sonny. They each have 7 NCAA tournament wins at Auburn.
Wow. Well, here's the question. One more. I hate that 2020 season. Remember in March, Auburn went on the road, beat Tennessee 84-64 in Knoxville. They were going to get a tournament bid. So I'm going to count that as 7 times. I can, but I'd like to. But Chuck Person, my freshman year, my roommate was from Luverne down on 331 South Alabama, friendliest city in the South. And Glenn goes, "Hey, Rob, I want you to meet one of my buddies." And Glenn was a big guy, building science major at Auburn, Chuck Person. And Chuck was so cool, the rifleman. And we all know what happened. And I'm just curious, among 3 guys like y'all that are smart, that are your blood runs, as red as mine. You didn't like what happened at the time back when it happened, but you think Chuck Person will ever be back at Auburn to come out and be the celebrity in Auburn? I mean, what's his future? Because he brought Auburn a lot, and so did Wesley. I'm just curious what y'all think.
I'll take first stab at it. I think we can seem very harsh in the moment and in the early periods of, you get angry at someone that threatened to get Bruce Pearl fired by his actions, and what Bruce Pearl has meant to Auburn basketball is transformational. And so there's anger that persists more than a couple of years, but time heals a lot. And I think Americans, and I would say people in the state of Alabama, both Auburn and Alabama, I think we, at heart, if we think someone is remorseful and they contributed, they had an impact in their playing career, and then later, then I think I'm more optimistic that the time can come. I'm not so sure about statues being erected. I think that's off the table. But as far as being welcome back in the Auburn family, showing up at games, there's probably a contrition, some kind of public contrition that's up to Chuck Person to do or not. And he doesn't owe that to me or any Auburn people. But if that means something to him, then I think there's a process you go through to ask for forgiveness. And then generally people are we're Christian for the most part. We're a godly people, and forgiveness is part of that. So, I think I'm more optimistic that would happen in the future, but probably not in a year or two. Rob, what do you guys think?
Yeah. Well, Doug, I agree with you. I think at some point, but probably not anytime soon. I think that, like you said, time heals all wounds, but it's going to be a while before that one heals.
What do you think, Kevin?
I'll say this: Chuck Person is an Auburn man. He still loves that school. He loves that program. He pulls for that program. I talk to Chuck every once in a while. Saw him at the state high school basketball. Saw him at the state high school basketball finals here in Birmingham a couple of weeks ago. Do you know he served as an assistant coach for Brantley High School, his alma mater, and was a personal coach, a trainer for their best player, who scored 40 in one of the 2, I think it was a championship game. I can't remember now if it was the semifinal or the final. Chuck's a good dude.
Yeah.
And Chuck did an awful lot of good for Auburn that people know, and some of it they don't know about. There are also things about what happened that the full story has not been told. Yeah. I will tell you that. Not that he didn't make mistakes. He certainly did. But Chuck Person's an Auburn man. I'll just say that. And I think the Auburn family would do well to let bygones be bygones, forgive and forget, and move on. I mean, the dude also, let's not forget how good a player he was. He
second to Mingo, you think?
Still the leading scorer all time in Auburn history. Still, when his senior year was 86. And let me say this.
Yeah.
In 2004, ESPN, it was the 25th anniversary of ESPN. So they were putting together 25-year anniversary, silver anniversary teams in different sports from different conferences. And I was on a panel to choose the 25-year all-SEC basketball team. And it was pretty easy selecting the other four: Jamal Mashburn, Shaquille O'Neal, Chris Jackson, Wade Houston from Tennessee, and Allen Houston, I should say. Wade was his dad, the coach.
Yeah, the coach.
And a couple other guys on the panel immediately said Charles Barkley. And I said, hold on a second.
Because of his celebrity.
Charles was he was the greatest NBA player in Auburn history, in the state of Alabama history, one of the 50 all-time greats from anywhere in NBA history. But at Auburn, Chuck had more impact as a player. He stayed 4 years. Charles stayed 3. Charles got him into the NCAA tournament with Chuck in 84. Then Charles went on to the NBA. But it was the next 2 years when they went to the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, led by Chuck Person. So Chuck had more impact at Auburn. And so I basically convinced the other panelists that Chuck Person should be on that 25-year all-SEC team. And that's how we voted.
Good.
Wow. Impressive. Hey, This is fun. A real subplot when any of these analysts talk about Auburn's prospects, and I don't blame them. They've got to fill up airspace with some kind of, controversy and provocateur content. But you've got to talk about the curious case of Chad Baker-Mazara, and can he get through 6 games without losing his mind? So the Auburn team and Coach Pearl were leaving Neville. I'm sure y'all saw this. I know Ron saw it, the video. And at some point, Baker-Mazara walks out of the arena to hop the bus to head to Lexington, fly to Lexington. And it was reported that a woman stopped Baker-Mazara for a picture and then said to him, "Go get him, Chad, but just keep your cool." And he smiled back at her and said, "I got you."
Yeah.
But I thought, Rob, the reason I would never be an athletic director is that I'd take the mafia approach to it. If I'm John Cohen, I'd be on the phone with Alabama State's AD right now. And I'd say, "Hey, we just called to congratulate you on that incredible, dramatic win. And we look forward to a clean game tomorrow in Lexington. And oh, by the way, I'm sure soon we'll be renegotiating your payday football games and payday basketball games with us. So I'm sure you'll agree with me that we hope that CBM is not triggered with physical play tomorrow." Are you following me, Coach, on this?
Yeah.
That's why I wouldn't be an AD.
Well, it was cool this morning. We had our intern, Farron, who's a freshman at Auburn there across from the Sigma Newhouse. And I said, "Do you see Chad Baker-Mazara around town on campus much?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, he's out a lot." And he bought 840 donuts for the Auburn students.
He's
who
a
were
Boy
sleeping,
Scout.
overnight for the IBOB, as Kevin calls it, IBOB Part 2. And I think this is really cool because I have so much respect for all three of y'all because I know your history, I know your backgrounds. I'm with Kevin, and I'll say this about there's players that every school has that have come and gone. Remember, great ESPN's done an incredible Johnny Newman at Ole Miss. You think about him, another Memphis guy. Keith Lee at Memphis. Where is Keith Lee? We don't know where he is, but boy, do we remember him. Chuck Person, I will never forget when Auburn got in the Sweet 16 against North Carolina and played them really hard. And I'm down at Pensacola with my girlfriend at the time out on Sabine Pass at their house on the beach. And we were watching and listening to the Auburn postgame network. And my good friend Chuck Galena, you probably know him. Chuck and I, he's up in Memphis right now. And boy, does he miss Auburn. And he came home to take care of his mom who passed away last year. But he's one of the best Auburn people you'll ever meet in your life. He knew Wesley very well. And we would go to Grizzlies games when he came to town. And if you were an Auburn person wanting something, the person-to-person softball complex down in Brantley, we all know about what happened. Dadgummit. But you think they wouldn't take Will Wade back at LSU in a heartbeat if the opportunity came about? I'll look for the day sooner than later because I'm a forgiving person because, boy, as my dad said, boy, you could screw up an anvil. I've done a lot of stupid stuff in my life, and I've been forgiven. But Chuck is as Auburn, as it gets. And maybe, like Doug said, a public contrition or whatever. But I hate to see people that are still mad about stuff that happened years ago for whatever reason. So it's cool to have that kind of history right here. And Ronnie, the message boards on AU Undercover, you're getting 8.1 million page views here a month. That's the average. Do the
you should think
Gazendas,
about monetizing that, Ron.
97.2 million last year. I can't imagine. I think the only thing cooler would be if I'm at the beach drinking a beer and Mildred walks by in a two-piece. I'll digress on that. What do you think, Ronnie? How big is it? What's the impact right now? The content that's on this AU Undercover, and Scarbo knows that show Sunday night was unreal. We're not even talking about football. And I know it's been the last 5 years have been rough, but man, when does spring practice start? I mean, I know, but that's where we are. This is how big this event is. I'm fired up.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of fun. While we're talking about this, Kevin, I want to get your take on something. We're talking about Chuck Person, but you and I haven't discussed Terry Bowden too much at length. A little bit the same thing. I mean, obviously Terry didn't go to school there, but did coach there, and
won a game or two.
Won a game or two, and there's a lot of positive things. First, best 5-year start in Auburn history. What do you think about Auburn fans kissing and making out with Terry Bowden?
Why not? I mean, at this point, look, I'm sure in hindsight, and you may have asked Terry this, I don't know. I haven't. If he had to do it over again, would he have coached out that final season in 98? He knew where it was headed. He knew that they were going to make a change, obviously, and he decided to not stick around till the play ended. He decided to, leave. And, but you can't go back and change history. You can't change decisions you made that you regret later. But look at all the good he did for Auburn. I mean, as you said, he was almost too good too soon. It's really what hurt him. If you reverse what he did at Auburn, and you start out with that 98 season, and then you go to 97, you go to Atlanta, and then you go to, and then all of a sudden, and then you build up to 9-1-1, and then 11-0. Who knows how long he's there? And maybe it would have grounded him a little more.
Well,
because he started out so high, so fast, it's easy to lose sight of how you got there.
Well, and you get a job like that and you're in your 30s. It's a different deal. And if you remember when Tommy Bowden was let go at Clemson, he left midseason. Same situation, and could have finished it out. And we were in a little bit different situation when Ron Zook got fired at Florida, but he could have left midseason. They called Ron in and said, "Hey, I remember him coming into the staff meeting that morning. He said, 'Hey boys, they're pulling the plug,' and they fired him, and then they fired me. Nobody else got fired for another couple of months. But it was interesting. He chose to stay, and it ended up helping him get the Louisville job. I'm sorry, not the Louisville job, the Illinois job, because the way he handled it and the way that he did things. Terry probably could have done some things differently, and I think he would and has admitted, hey, look, I would do things differently, and but 25 years, there's a lot of things I'd do differently too.
There are, if I can add a sort of bolt on one observation and I'm going by memory from back in 93 in that era. The reports I've heard that make sense from what y'all are saying, like normally you would think when you hire a coach, if he gets a fast start, that's a strategic asset. But I think both of you made the point that we know when you've got a really young coach that came from Samford and he has the last name Bowden, and his dad was so legendary. Gosh, he practically created the Florida State football program. You could say he did. They were a women's school not too many decades prior to that.
And your older brother is working for you as the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and so all of a sudden you have the whole world. You go into the swamp and beat the great Steve Spurrier the way that game went, and it's supposed to be every advantage is Florida's as in a revenge game, and that's back-to-back years you beat Florida, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm imagining myself at that age in that circumstance, and I'm probably thinking I'm pretty cool. Can you understand that? Yeah. I've got the world by the tail, and I'm gonna. And he hired. He ended up in politics. Help me, Ron. An Auburn guy and you start getting the attitude pins and the every year audacity.
There was always audacity.
By year two, year one, I loved it. It was culture, creating culture. Year 2 and 3, I started to be embarrassed by it, just speaking honestly. And maybe that was my problem, not his. But I am told that that was revenue and profit that was going directly to Terry Bowden, and I mean, which is the free market. In one sense, I don't care any more than I care about Nick Saban doing Aflac commercials with Dion. But it was if you understand Auburn people and the Auburn culture, and it was in the wake of how we were used to interacting with the legendary coach Pat Dye, I think Terry, in a way, he was unlucky that success came so quickly. He gets credit for that, but he also gets blame. If we're going to be objective here, he gets blamed for going off the rails in ways that I don't really care to document here. It's just that would be piling on, because it's out there. But I think this many years later, I hope that both Terry Bowden and the Auburn family will do their part to open the possibility, just like Chuck Person, the possibility for love. Love is more powerful than hate. And I think that's especially true in how when Auburn is doing well, it's usually more about love and unity and winning than it is about dividing ourselves over weird reasons.
Hey, let me draw a parallel. This may sound strange at first, but follow me here. Between Terry Bowden and Chuck Person, they both expected Auburn to be great. Now, in Terry's case, it still is vivid in my memory. He gets the Auburn job. And the first one-on-one interview I did with him after he took that job, he showed me on a yellow legal pad. He had calculated how many games a year he had to win to pass Bear Bryant in career victories. Ronnie, you're shaking your head. You know what I'm talking about.
That was his goal.
He had calculated that. That was his goal. He didn't dream too little dreams, to use a phrase from the UAB president who hired Gene Bartow and started a Division I athletic department. Terry aimed high, and he flew too close to the sun too early. Essentially, if you want to bottom line his story.
Icarus.
Chuck Person. And I don't know how many people know this story. Early on, Bruce Pearl hires Chuck as an assistant. They're having a staff meeting. It's about recruiting. They're going over recruits. And Chuck pointed out a high-level recruit that he thought they could get. And one of the other assistants in the room kind of snickered and said, "We can't get that guy." And Bruce Pearl looked at that other assistant and said, "Look, if you don't think we can get that kind of guy, there's the door. You don't need to be here. We're not here to be mediocre. We're not here to be okay. We're here to be great." Yeah. And that's the way Chuck approached it as well. So, and Pat Dye really is the one who changed the attitude of Auburn, if you ask me, about being great, not being satisfied to be anybody's little brother, to be a champion. Hey. And Terry Bowden had that, and so did Chuck Person.
Kevin, I think you hit not to interrupt you, Doug, but
go ahead.
I do think you make a great point in that, since Dye, everything changed. Everybody except Brian Harsin won. Now everybody also fell off a cliff, at some point. And that's typically, that's been Auburn's story. But, we had Jay Jacobs on a couple of weeks ago talking about the alignment at Auburn, asking about Bobby Louder. And he says, he said for the first time since, Louder and Dye, Auburn is more aligned than it's been. And he said, I think we're very fortunate to have Chris Roberts as president. And he was very positive about where things are with Auburn. And that is a far cry from where we were, 5 years ago.
The only thing I was going to say, and I agree with everything you just said, Ron, and you have got the history deep inside you and Rob both, the interactions you've had. Kevin does too. It's just that Kevin had a professional duty not to become quite so buddy with the subject of his writing that he could be unduly biased. But I'll say, I think I feel pretty confident in saying, from my not small circle of Auburn people over a long time, there aren't many benefits, Rob, to getting older, but memory and friendships may be one of them. Yeah. The saying, youth is wasted on the young. If only I had the brain, feeble as it is, the brain I have now and the energy of when I was 20, we could conquer the world. But I think about 90% of Auburn people if you'll allow me to set aside the Gen Zs who struggled, they have to go on YouTube to know anything about Pat Dye. But I think about 90% of Auburn people would say where we are right now, the foundation and you just look at football, but really it applies that what Bruce is doing, Auburn pride that we can win at anything we put our mind to, that there's some Dye DNA and even in what Bruce is doing, even though I'd give Pearl, almost all the credit. But I think Auburn people in large percentages would say it all really changed when Pat Dye brought his tough as hell Georgia growing up and coaching for Bryant. He brought that, and playing at Georgia, he brought that tough mentality to Auburn. And he said, we're not going to care what's happening in Tuscaloosa. We're going to worry about ourselves, but they're not ever going to outwork us. And I think that mentality, when we're doing well, you can find parallels with the Pat Dye persona invariably. Now, how many decades going forward will that last? Probably not a lot, but I hope that history records well that what changed the mentality and expectations of Auburn athletics was Patrick Fane Dye.
That's my boys at his house the night before kick 6 over at the Treehouse. We got to go in there about 4:30. I'll never forget Wilson goes, Coach, you think we're going to beat Auburn? Coach had a cocktail lemonade going, and he said, I'm going to tell you one thing, Gus is going to get after that ass. And I'll never forget that. And my kids grew up, I'm kind of into history, and they knew him, and they revered him. And my daughter, my kids, and our friend David Varner and Jennifer, their daughter was one of his interns out there. And then, my daughter's friend Chloe, when she was in vet school, lived out there for a year on the boathouse with him. And he was so cool. I said, Coach, she can help you with your animals. She's in vet school. He goes, well, send her out here. And then next day she sends me a picture sitting there with him. She goes, hey, she would, how we would leave the games at halftime, or Chico or somebody would drive him. That toughness, Shook Jordan, Pat Dye, that's what we look for in every sport down there. And to hear the three of y'all wax eloquently about your memories, and Kevin is absolute pro, and so are you, Ronnie and Doug. But as a writer for the Birmingham News, you make people think when you're a great writer. Sometimes you get them out of their comfort zone.
Love Kevin's writing. It's humor and provocative thinking, challenging us to think. Kevin, you have very few equals over the years. How you can turn a phrase, my friend.
Yeah, and all of y'all being able to take the content like what you do, Ronnie, this staff that y'all have here on Auburn Undercover, to hear what I've heard today, because I'm getting a lot of response from people going, this is a cool discussion. And I think it's been one of the best discussions I've heard in a long time, because these are three people that know that program well, and I've grown up with it. I think it's fascinating.
Something else is it took me a minute to get over my Iron Bowl book BS immaturity about hating the other guy, Yeah. And there's one day of the year, I don't care even if you marry and you have a mixed marriage, it's okay to hate at least one day a year, and some people are never going to get over their hating 365, But it took me a minute to appreciate that Coach Dye was unbending about, he wanted to beat Alabama. He understood that. Maybe in some ways to a fault, that you pour so much emotional resource into that one game and the Georgia game that it probably cost Auburn under Dye. It probably cost a couple of losses that were strategically stupid some years. But Pat Dye, he was only complimentary of Coach Bryant.
Yeah.
He never forgot that Coach Bryant gave him his first really big time opportunity. I mean, he probably wasn't making what paper delivery boys made back then, but he got to be on that staff, and and then he got more and more responsibility, and so I think some of us need to get over ourselves about it's almost like the art of learn to hate the right way. Hate once a year, and hate in a way that makes the rivalry the most incredible rivalry in sports, but don't deprive yourself of enjoying friendships with good people that might happen to be from the other side. Like I've got Rob in my hunting camp, I'm selective about which Bama guys get in the hunting club, but they're first class. And we just understand when we can talk about the rivalry or not. And we're never going to be in the camp this Iron Bowl weekend with high-powered rifles chambered with bullets.
I don't hunt with my Bama friends around Iron Bowl time. That's true. And I tell you, a guy that got Dye that job at Alabama, I think it was Boyd Boylston. I think his daughter lives over in Atlanta. He made $500 a month, and he got an extra $87 a month to be in the National Guard. And I think he'd go to Camp Shelby near Hattiesburg every summer for 2 weeks. But I think we're getting to the point now in basketball where we're looking at Bruce Pearl in that same way. I mean, it's, guys, Kevin, I'll say this to you every time you're on. You're writing with that sense of urgency and passion about basketball like you do football. And when you start getting Auburn people, and Auburn Undercover's putting it out, and the Dose is doing it.
Kevin's always loved basketball, though.
Yeah, I think that's been your first love, even more so than baseball. I know.
It's the reason I have a Samford basketball and a Birmingham Southern basketball behind me. Those are related to my sons. The Samford coach's wife gave my first son, Kaiser, the Samford ball when he was 1 year old. First game I took him to. And then my younger son, Cannon, went to a camp at Birmingham Southern. He got that basketball as part of his team being there at the camp. So, no, I've loved basketball since I was shoveling snow off the driveway in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, so I could get shots up in December and January when I wasn't playing on the team at St. Patrick's grade school.
Wasn't there a brewery up there that you could smell?
Yingling?
Yinglings.
Hey, I've got a refrigerator full out here. That's my wife's from Philly, so that's just what we drink.
Ronnie knows. This is the ultimate Pennsylvania story. Growing up, this building right here was St. Patrick's Church. This building right next to St. Patrick's Church was Yingling's Brewery. Every day I went to grade school at St. Patrick's Grade School from grade 1 through 8. Every day I walked past that brewery. Every day we went to church. And we went to church every morning during Lent before we went to school.
Holy Mass.
I had to smell that brewery. And let me tell you guys, you've been around, I'm sure. Breweries do not smell good.
No.
And that is the reason, to this day, I do not drink beer. Because I had to smell that brewery in my formative years.
It's like working at Krispy Kreme. You're not going to like donuts after that.
I worked at Burger King for 2 years and still still not a big fan of that. We brought a point a minute ago about Dye and he getting his shot at Alabama and Bryant giving him that opportunity. But he also understood the difference between Auburn and Alabama, and the the old saying, Alabama fans love Alabama football, Auburn fans love Auburn. There's something to be said for that, and I do, one of my favorite Die stories, and I was around him a number of times, but I was one of the few holdovers from Terry that stayed over with Tuberville, and we're in a staff meeting, and this was very, very early on in Tuberville's tenure, and he invites Die in, and Die comes in, and he's being Die, and he says, when I got here 12 years ago, 16 years ago, whatever it was at that point, he says, there wasn't a damn Auburn bumper sticker or a damn Auburn hat or a damn Auburn t-shirt or anything else around this state. He said, now we got to whipping their ass. All that changed pretty quick. And, that was
not a subtle point you're making, Coach Die.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at basketball.
He brought a swagger,
didn't he? Going on. Yeah. But, and Sonny and Wimp, what they did in basketball. I remember in 2006 on a Friday, Auburn was playing Arkansas State. I just rushed down from South Dakota with my 3 kids, and we're at an Auburn and Faulkner State basketball game. And there's Winifred E. Wimp Sanderson sitting on the bench. His son was the coach, and there was a line of Auburn people going out of the Coliseum just to get his autograph and say hello. And the people that you compete the most fierce competition with are the ones that I respect the most. I got too many Alabama friends, too many close ones. I remarried. I got a daughter that went there. I still love her. But Auburn people, I think, are, they're not as many Auburn grads, fans, whatever. But no matter where you go, there's a connection like, man, I knew Job, I can take anything, man. Nothing is you'll never see an Auburn fan throw their gear away because the team lost a game. They just double down and get more gear. That's just what they do.
Kevin, I got to ask you, ask you if you can take your sports journalist, writer, and podcast guy hat off and put your Kevin Scarbinsky dad hat on. You've got am I right? You've got a kid at Florida right now?
Well, one's at the University of Florida, one's at Santa Fe College in Gainesville, who's transferring to Florida in the fall. So I've got 2 Gators. Yes.
So good for them. Tremendous university, and you're going to be proud of them when they graduate. But the context here, I'm sitting in University of Phoenix Stadium, row 27, when Wes Byram kicked an unnecessary field goal that if Chiswick allowed Cam to take the ball and put it in the end zone, it could have iced it. But regardless, that ball sailed over my head. And at the same time, Auburn had sealed the deal on that national championship. My Auburn daughter, Lauren, was in Sky Bar in Auburn, and that entire throng of students rushed with beer having been sprayed in their hair, rushed to Toomer's Corner, and she's texting me, I've got like 10% battery life left. So, if the Gators do what a lot of people think they're going to the next few weeks, you're going to so enjoy that you get to vicariously live that college student joy of those students. Comment on that.
Yeah. But here's what you're missing though, Doug. So he has, of course, he's got the Gators winning it all. I've picked Auburn to win it all. So do I want my son to enjoy a national championship while he's a student there? Or do I want to look really, really smart by picking Auburn to end the greatest season in the history of the state of Alabama in college basketball with a national championship, which is really the only way this should end, with them playing Alabama in the title game.
Yeah.
Or again, it's a tough one.
I hear you.
I want my son to be happy. I want him to be happy in everything. Maybe not in this case.
For Auburn, it's not even. I'm not milquetoast about if we just make the Final Four. That's always true. It's so hard in single game elimination. But the way this Auburn team was built, it's difficult for me to imagine, even with Bruce Pearl, constructing a team that has this many answers, this many capabilities, and not cutting the nets down. I think, to me, cut the nets down or bust, baby.
Yeah, you better. If you're not going to go big, don't go. And I think Gary Parrish, do you know Gary, Kevin?
Oh, I do. Yes.
Yeah. He's the
Does
Memphis
the name
guy from Horn
Albert?
Lake.
Does the name Albert mean anything to you?
Yeah. Okay. Well, by the way, I talked to my friend who knows a lot about Albert Means a lot. And, I think he's teaching now in Memphis. And used to see those guys, Leo Kirk and Lin Lang, Milton Kirk and Lin Lang would come to the touchdown clubs, and there'd be 10 stud Roy Adams at the table with the other cast of characters. They'll make a movie about it one day. But I have someone who has a personal family member that was involved in that saga, and he's going to tell the story on Sidelines that no one's ever heard. And I've been promised not to tell him, but there are a lot of characters involved, and that was kind of fun. But Gary picked Auburn to win it and take the Nets down.
Gary, of course,
what's happening?
He's the CBS Sports college basketball writer. He's their lead writer, and he used to be in Memphis, as you said, for a long time. And Gary, to his credit, he still lives in that area, I know.
Yeah.
And to his credit, even after Auburn lost to Texas A&M, even after Auburn lost to Florida going back then, he kept Auburn number one in his daily. He did a daily top 25 and 1 on CBSSports.com, and he never wavered. He said, think of it like a golf tournament. Auburn's got a 4-shot lead. Okay, they just bogeyed that hole. They still have a 3-shot lead in terms of their overall resume. I thought it was a brilliant analogy, and I thought he was spot on.
And you know what people miss?
Really
people miss the nature of March Madness, the architecture of it. If you pick Auburn to cut the Nets down, you're not saying this. What you tell friends. I said this, Rob. I love him. He's so good on air. But we're not saying Auburn is going to beat Florida. We're saying that Auburn won't ever have to play Florida in March Madness, because one of these teams in Florida's region is a problem for the Florida Gators. And there's some in Auburn's region, and all 4 regions. Yeah. You get to the Sweet 16, even round of 32, it becomes perilous. And that's the drama of this whole thing.
Yeah, it really is. And I think the consensus here is that these SEC with 14 teams in there, odds are pretty good. There are going to be some SEC teams in the Final Four, but they've spread them out. Don't y'all think pretty well to where they're not going to be playing each other? But who was it that said the ghost out there? Yale, Auburn could play Yale in the Sweet 16. Texas A&M, he's like Freddie Krueger, Buzz Williams to Bruce Pearl. He's just there, and his team.
And don't forget Trey Donaldson playing for Michigan.
Yes, Michigan.
That
could be playing
buzzer
Michigan
beater he
16.
made. We almost have to see Auburn
winning the tournament. Did nothing for Michigan.
We almost have to see Auburn, crazy. Michigan, don't we, Kevin?
Yes, I think Auburn would rather see Michigan, even though they've got 2 7-footers, than they would Texas A&M again.
Much less Yale. I've got Auburn base. I want to play Yale. I don't want to play Yale again. I mean, Auburn should wax them, but don't flirt with danger when you've had it a year before.
Yeah, I mean, Ronnie, we don't want to play Yale. I agree, but I don't know. There's nightmare scenarios for everybody, but just embrace what you got, and y'all are putting out tons of content at AU Undercover. I mean, I'm probably 25, 30 page views before lunch a day. It's an addiction. And Scarbo knows the AU dose. It's all
Ron,
right
you've got great writers.
You really do.
Yourself, Philip, the young puppies. Y'all are doing some
King.
great. It's not just the content. Everybody's got access to a lot of the content, but they seem to really work hard to get the interviews, and then they bring some writing style to it. So my compliments to what y'all are doing.
Well, thank you. Those guys work really, really hard. We're proud of what we've done.
Yeah,
no doubt.
They do. And Scarbo knows, and all this basketball content. Again, we talked some football, but not about this year's team. So eventually we're going to be talking football, but not until after April 7th.
Hey, speaking for corporate America, you do not measure productivity the next 2 or 3 days.
Yes.
Just don't even just shut that productivity measurement down for a couple of weeks. It's going to be ridiculous. Streaming, there will be systems being shut down because of streaming video on people's desktops. That's what we love about it.
Hey, stay tuned to this channel. Buddy Martin Show tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern. Scarbo Knows, AU Undercover. I'll be back on in the morning with SEC Sidelines Sports Network at 9 a.m. Eastern. Thanks to everybody for watching, man. We really, really appreciate it. Share the show. We'll be back. Thank you.